Welcome to Real Talk. I am Anne.
And I'm Denise.
We have Denise on today for a special episode. We talk a lot on Real Talk about memories, and many of them can be very painful. And many of us never look back, but some of us actually make podcasts about it. And some of us actually write books, like Denise is writing a book right now, and I have written a book. And some of us actually revisit the scene of the crime. It actually took me, in this case, it's not a crime, but it took me over 20 years to revisit my dad's grave since I had been a kid. I mean, I never went. I was drawn to find my biological mom's home after years that I had been there as a kid. And I needed, for some reason, to find it and drive by. I had a horrific thing happen to me in a place. It was absolutely, and I never even talk about it on the podcast, and maybe someday I will. But I did revisit that place. So it's really interesting how sometimes we're drawn to revisit, and I think it's part of the healing. At least it was for me. Denise, you had a unique experience recently where you were able to go back to your home.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could remind our listeners and maybe tell any new listeners a reason as to why you recently took this trip and why it was so significant. Now, I was able to read your book
Yeah.
and kind of go over. I'm still working on the draft and looking over it and everything, which it's quite the story, and I
Yeah.
think everybody really needs to hear this. But as I read it, I realized even more how much of an amazing person you really are and how resilient and brave you are. So, I mean, I am really thankful that you're even telling your story.
Yeah. Well, to I guess for whoever's new, I did grow up. I was product of two drug addicted teens, and I grew up in a very abusive environment where, I hit every form of abuse, to the point where my mother's drug addiction um, had her, I guess, use me as some kind of bargaining payment, whatever you want to call it. And a lot of people don't talk about that. So yeah, it's been quite a background. So
So you actually got to go back and
mhm.
visit where some of these things happened.
Yeah, down the street. So I didn't go in the house, but we lived at so many different places.
Yeah.
Um, so the house that I saw, I didn't go in, kind of like you. It was just like from the outside, and
Yeah.
you could see the windows where, where the bathroom was, and the front door and different things like that. So because my childhood babysitter, who is my good memories, just
Yeah.
lives a couple houses down.
Right.
So there are a lot of things that go along with when you I think that's why maybe it was a little bit um easier maybe this time, because I am in the
Okay.
good spot versus inside
Oh,
the shady part. And the abuse that I faced in that home, there were a couple times where there was a sexual abuse that happened when my mother would come and visit.
mm,
Um, but it was, there was a lot of chaos, turmoil, manipulating this game of chess that I talk about in the book. So there are feelings there that are not great, but
yeah.
and there are places where we used to live, a couple different ones that I cannot still to this day kind of go by. It's like
Okay.
a little bit of
Okay.
a like I don't know, so a couple of them I can, but a couple of them it's like a trigger, and I just
Yeah.
can't, I haven't gotten to that point in my life. I think I'm gradually getting there, but it's, there's a yeah, it's a teetering thing.
So in your book,
Mm,
You were able to really share a lot of what happened to you, but also one of the things that you really share, I mean, the book is a lot about the people
mhm.
who helped you, which
Yeah.
I absolutely love. So you actually went to that area to be able to share your book and what you wrote about this special person in your life and give her a copy of that book.
Yeah, and of course it's not finalized or finished. We're still
Right,
editing and
right.
there's a lot more that I'm gonna put in. But it was a good chunk of everything. And so yeah, I revisited my high school teacher, my health teacher. And I was very close with her, and we have a very close relationship. I would call it close as adults. But I think she's known her importance in my life, but just,
Mhm,
how some people are like, oh, this is important. But to really be able to give her this book and tell her what was going on in school, or, in my life during the time she was with me, that she had no idea that was happening. And
mhm.
so it's kind of that relationship of being able to say, here's the things that you did for me and why they were so impactful. Because while
Mhm.
you're doing this at school and making me feel this way, I'm going home every night and getting a whole opposite thing. So you were the reason why I got up, and you're the reason why I show up. And so it was more of telling her. And I think that's really a big thing too. You could tell somebody, you made a difference in my life. But I think the big impact that I wanted to share is what was actually happening in my life during that time. So that, I don't know, I just wanted her to know. Because I always tell her, you've been so close to me, you're this, but you don't even know how much of an impact. So being able to share, like I said, being able to share the trauma that was going on at home with me, like I was having this trauma, being
Right.
able to share that, and then telling her, what we used to do. We used to go and sit in her car. She would like, come talk to me. And so it was,
Yeah.
hey, do you remember those days? She would remember those days, but she had no idea the opposite side. So it's really kind of putting there the big picture of, this impact. I can now explain to you more what was happening, and you had no idea. But you still made this amazing thing. You raised me to be certain. I talk about the women who raised me and all these
Right.
different, so yeah, I wanted to. She's older, and so I had a dream about her husband who had passed away a year ago. And it was, in our lifetime, we don't always have those vivid dreams. And this was vivid. And for years, she had told me to write a book. She's like, you really need to write your story. There are so many people that can benefit from it. And I kind of put it off, put it off. And her husband came to me in this dream, and he picked up a book that was beside me. And it was kind of that, okay, I gotcha, I see ya. And it was so easy to write and flowing. And then it was for me, like, being able to hand her that. Now she knows it's
Mhm.
not complete, but to say, you asked me to do this, so I wanna do this. I
Mhm.
wanna give it to you, and
Mhm.
now you can read my life, the things you didn't know. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it was very important for me to do that.
How was she when you actually handed it to her? I mean, what an amazing experience.
Oh, yeah. Well, she was shocked. She was like, "Wait, you did this?" She was just like, she was floored because, I had put it off for so long that she,
Right.
was in disbelief. And um, of course, she didn't read it when we
Right.
were there. Uh,
Right.
but she did the next day, and I don't know how far she got, but she was like, it just shows. I mean, she said, "You're such an amazing, I just didn't know, and it hurts me to see that you had all this in you, or happening to you, but look at how amazing you are." It was one of those, you know, growing up, I had wished for these parents, and I found myself with these women who I say raised me by their little things that they did, wanting them
Mhm.
to be proud of me because, as a kid, you want your parent to be proud. And so she tells me she's so proud and all this other stuff. There's something that comes with that. It's like, this was my whole thing. I wanted to make the people who made a difference in my life, I wanted them to be proud of me.
Mhm.
It's like they're the
Oh,
women, you know?
I'm I 100% have that in my life where the
Yeah.
people and,
Mhm.
some of them, I want them to be proud of me, but then I had some haters along the way. I had some
Mm.
people that thought, "She's never gonna make it." And I think that, they're proud of me and surprised,
Yeah.
and, it's there's that always that and I think everybody has that, people that kinda motivate them forward because they didn't believe in them,
Mhm.
um, but it's kinda cool to be I think that they're really shocked to see that not only am I able to take care of myself,
Right.
but I can take care of I had 2 older kids and now I have my grandkids that I adopted and I'm raising them and they have special needs and I'm able to, take care of many, many things, multitask, sometimes I'm
Yeah.
doing 10 things at once, and it's amazing when I wasn't even able to take care of myself, and now I'm able to do all of these things, and really it's about maturity, and I think that it took me a long time to, um reach my age, I always
Mhm.
say.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I was always so far behind, and I think it was because of my disabilities, but also because of the trauma. I mean,
Mhm.
when you get stuck at a certain age and you can't move forward, you just can't move past that.
So you're
It took
stuck in that age, like, that's where you felt you were stuck at? Like, even as
Yes,
you are an adult now, so you still felt like you were stuck at this younger age?
I did.
Uh-huh. Okay. That's
Yeah. It took a long time for me to reach, an adult age.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Once again, here we go with our similarities. I up until I guess COVID, when I had to be forced to kinda, you
Okay.
don't have that runaway, as we're trauma survivors, we run away by keeping ourselves busy and distracted, and you think you've um, faced a lot of the things and you work through them. But man, you don't know what you haven't faced until you can't run. And one of the things
Mm,
that really made a point is I understand completely when you say you didn't grow up yet. I had always been stuck at 14 because that's
uh,
where everything like the storm started to brew of me using my voice and then being in the shelter and then just everything. And so I had someone tell me a number of years ago, another teacher of mine that I, view as an older sister, and um she said I was talking about, still trying to work out things, and I was telling her about another teacher, my favorite teacher. And she stopped me and she said, "Denise, you are talking as if you're 14. You need to not." And that was like the most eye-opening thing. And I feel like I'm still getting older. I'm still grow because I don't like, I couldn't stop being 14 and then just go to I don't know, it's probably 45, something like that. So I'm been growing up, to
mhm,
recognize.
mhm.
But yeah, she stopped me and she's like, "You are talking as if you're 14 and you're not
Interesting.
14." So, yeah, that I mean, I get it. I tell you, we have so many similarities. It's almost scary.
Well, I think trauma is really relatable. I mean, I
Mhm.
think that it's, trauma is trauma, and regardless of what your experiences are, it's affects many people, I think, the same way. So, it
Yeah, I
doesn't
mean,
surprise me.
yeah, it's a relatability again, and there's something that's really, maybe healing in that sense that you recognize, I mean, as we are talking and we share about our traumas and then this recognizable bond or coincidence between us, and I think that that's what makes, having our conversations back and forth so easy because you understand in a relatable manner. We might not have gone through the same story, but the emotions and the things that make us us in a way. There's so many relatability that you don't feel alone. It's like this, oh, there's someone else out there that gets it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that some of the things that we're talking about is interesting because it's things that you don't see. I
Mhm.
mean, yeah, there's the normal, maybe the fight or flight or the
Yeah,
PTSD or those kind of things that most people would relate with. But
right.
there's things like that we talk about, like always looking for a mom or,
Mhm.
having a picture in a wallet or hanging up a picture of somebody and saying, and dreaming before you go to sleep of, a family, and those kind of things are the things that I think people don't really talk about that aren't seen and aren't really part of that, but we're talking about it.
Yeah, yeah, and the same, like, as we're talking now about revisiting things, I don't
Yeah,
think I've heard a lot of people talk about that, which again brings me to these are great conversations to have and to,
right,
be able to share so that somebody else I call it we're the light in someone else's darkness.
right,
So
right,
that they can, they see our light that, they're walking towards that light. Do you know what
right.
I mean? In that
Yeah,
healing process.
right.
So, yeah, crazy.
Now, when you got to go there, I mean, you got to meet with that lady, but you also got to meet with your babysitter that you talked about just a
Mhm,
little bit ago.
mhm.
So, how did that go?
Well, it's good. So we have been in contact. Every time I go up, I do talk to her. Like we try to go to breakfast or something. And every day we play Wordle together and
Oh,
share.
okay.
Her daughter's 7 years younger than me. But so I grew up with, her daughter, 6 years that I was there. As her daughter grew, so did I. But again, what I was able to do is physically couldn't give her that book, and it was really like a last minute decision. I
Mhm.
emailed her it. And so she had no idea. I mean, she knew that things were bad in my house, but she didn't know her role.
Okay,
And
because she
so
is in the book.
yeah, I was just she is in the book, and so she didn't know her role in my life, and being able to share that and say, "This was your role, and this is what I remember, and this is how in my mind you raised me to be this way." And
Mhm.
one of the other things, again, because we talk, and we're in this group chat with her daughter, me and her, or her and I, her daughter, I see how the two of them, a mother-daughter bond and all the things that they do. So for me, I feel like it's a
Yeah,
continuation of
yeah.
learning, of being able to grasp. And again, I put that in the book and it's not something that she knew. And so I don't know, she hasn't said anything yet if she read it yet. So it might have been, I was there Friday, so maybe she's gotten to it. I don't know how people are going to react, but you do hope that they understand um the big impact. And I'll go through this. You said, how was that going there? It's so strange to me that when I went there, like as a kid, I thought this was the biggest house. It was big
Mhm,
and they had a bookshelf and they had that bookshelf filled with books. And I didn't
mhm,
have that at home. And
mhm,
they had a backyard with a swing and a kiddie pool and this garage. And we used to play
mm,
back there all the time. And I go there and I'm like, wow, it's not as big as it was. I mean, don't get me wrong. Um, it's still like I go into it and I'm like, man, this is like it's the same house, but there are some things that haven't changed in the house. So it's kind
mhm,
of like, oh my gosh, nostalgia, I guess. Because in
mhm.
her house, there was good feelings. And in
Right.
her house, I had
Yeah.
the upbringing and like I said, it's only down the street from my the house that I grew up in for 6 years, so
That's a long time.
it is. And so yeah, and again, outside of the house, her house, I can see the back window where our bathroom was and the
Mhm,
porch. And and I go around because that's the main road, so if I go by it, there's the porch that I used to sit at and look out at my neighbors across the street who was a mom with her kid. And I used to like wish that that was my mom. I think you shared your poem one of the one time we did the podcast, and I put that in my book because, here I am sitting on a ledge looking into this house where I wish
Mhm.
that I was. I may have even put on a tape how, like, this is how crazy I wanted a mom, that I think I actually recorded, on the boom box when you used to have that back in the
I used to have one of those.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I wanna say that I wanna say that I recorded saying, something to that effect, like, "Oh, you're so pretty and you're so kind, and I swear," and it just might be in my mind, or maybe it's because that's what I was thinking, but I put on there
Mhm.
something and I played it because, the street was kinda wide because it was like a fork in the road, and she was on the other side of the fork. Um,
Mhm.
so it's, I go look in that porch and I'm like, "Man, you know, there were so many memories of being on that porch." But I also look at that house and I remember those traumatic experiences.
Yeah.
So
It's a
it's
mix.
yeah, yeah. And so I think I'm getting better with it. I don't I almost try to avoid it because her house, I mean, I could avoid a little bit of it, but,
Mhm.
um but I'm getting better. So, it's a little bit better. There are still houses I can't go near, but there are houses that I pass and I remember everything.
Do you think it's healing to revisit, to go back? Do you think it's part of the healing?
I
Or is
some
it
Yeah, no, I think some way it is because, as I share my story, I share it, in speeches and keynotes, and then more of it that I can discuss in the book. It's
Mhm.
it's taking control of my story. And so I think as I am being able to heal over here, which is, like, far away, I think
Mhm.
every time I go back, and I have a lot of just in general, that area is very anxiety, like, fitting in with I went by my high school, and I just remember the angst of, you know, kids had these groups, and I just never quite knew where I fit in, and all I keep
Mhm.
thinking about is with high school is I was trying to survive at home. I
Yeah.
didn't, you know, but I think as I get older and I'm able to take control of this part of my life, especially, sharing in the book or sharing wherever, um,
Mhm.
I think each time I go up, there's it
Yeah.
I become more confident around it, a little bit
Mhm.
stronger around it. But I think too, sometimes maybe it's a mood. If I start to get anxiety and I see it, then it just I think
Yeah.
it's a teetering thing.
Yeah, sometimes I have gone in those areas like I talked about, and I think sometimes it's making new memories, you know?
Mm,
I mean, it's like adding a positive memory on top of what happened there. So the memory
yeah,
kind of changes a little bit and it's not as strong as it used to be. It's not what that area was,
back in the
as a definition, just that's all it was to me
yeah,
at one time. And I mean, I don't know. I still have a really hard time with the house that I grew up in. I
mm,
mean, I had the opportunity for me to get the house because my mom, my adopted mom, she went through this phase of dating, and she had this really weird time in her life. And I think it was because of a fear of she was getting older and she had some health problems. And for whatever reason, she really started dating around and
mm,
to get married. And,
mm,
and she did. And it cost her a lot. And she had said to me right before she got married, she's like, "Look, I'm gonna move in with this guy and you can have the house." And I went there with a friend of mine and we sat in the living room and I looked around and I was like, "I can't do it.
no,
I can't see myself living in this house." And since then, I've wondered, what my life would be like if I would have said yes, and,
Mm.
the things that I could have had differently. Um, but I'm glad that my life took the path that it did. And then, it made me realize as I looked back at those decisions, in life, where would our lives had ended up if we would have taken the opposite
Mhm.
path in the
Yeah,
fork of the road? I
yeah.
mean, that happens to all of us sometimes, I guess, where we reach a really major life decision. But, I know that I wouldn't have my kids now. And so I look at that kind of thing, and I'm really blessed for the life decisions that I did make, even when I was faced with, in the midst of trauma, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I could live in a house that I was in. Like, I couldn't live in that house.
Yeah.
Even though it had, um, less trauma than the other houses, I still couldn't do it. It was for
Mhm.
me, and I think that's what you're saying too, is, for me to write my own story, I gotta write my own story. And that
Yeah, that's
means yeah, and that means I have to close that chapter, and then start this new book, right?
yeah.
So I think if I was in there, I think I would have a lot more triggers. And how do you um
Mhm.
I don't think I could have worked through them the way that I have. I don't think that I would be as adult now as I was. I think I would have been stuck in whatever age I was when I was in that house. At least that's
Mhm.
in my mind. And
I
so
I think that some people would have looked at me as if, I mean, you're being given a house.
yeah.
The house is paid for,
Mhm.
and financially, I would have been a lot better off because,
Yeah.
we've struggled to pay houses and everything else along the way, and I have this mortgage and, I wouldn't have it. But yeah, I'm a different person mentally and emotionally because I chose my own path.
Yep. Yeah. And you separated yourself. I think that that's a big thing for us is that we can't like you, I've gone through good choices and bad choices and it, I think you have to remove yourself from the environment. For me, actually, I met my husband I was 20, I don't know, 25, 24, 25, and he's in the Air Force or he retired, but we got moved. And it was the first time that I physically moved from the environment. And I don't mean just the house. I mean, like, when I go back to New Jersey in that whole area, there is um a story all out there that I'm no longer in. And
Mhm,
so, I had to physically remove myself from that story in order to realize I needed to shift and find my way and just separate, like you said, if somebody gave me a house, I wouldn't, I would rather struggle with a mortgage and grow as a person and change and build my own life
mhm.
versus that financial freedom.
Yeah, my neighbor, back then still lives in the same house,
Yeah.
and we're Facebook friends.
Yeah.
And he told me, the lady in my old house that had bought it from, I guess, my mom, is thinking about moving. And he said, "Oh, I'd love to have you as a neighbor again. I'm just letting you know if you ever want that house, it's going to be maybe up for sale." And I actually, in my head, because, oh, I got to tell you, it's a beautiful house.
Mm.
It's absolutely huge with a beautiful backyard and with these woods behind it that I lived in. I
Mhm.
loved going in those woods. And I did have, when you live in a traumatic environment and you revisit, there's you remember the bad, but
Yes.
I can still see myself playing in those woods and all the good times that I had. And, I mean, that's where some of that comes in where I'm not really sure, but I can't get myself to go in those four walls again where that poem came from was
Mm.
in the bedroom in that house.
Yeah.
And I can't go back into that bedroom, I don't think. Going driving by and maybe even going through the house, knocking on that door and say, "You know what? I
Yeah.
used to live here. Can I come in?"
Yeah.
Um, would you do that? Would you go? No, you don't think you
No.
no.
No, I think, and I lived multiple places, so
Yeah.
I can say that if if I were to go through one house, that would be the house my neighbor that my babysitter was at. That house I would be able to, um, I think because, well, I don't know why, but I feel I could go through that one. But,
Well,
like, there was an apartment right after that that I moved in with my mother because that's when she got custody, and
mhm,
like you with the window, and I said that's the similarity is
mhm,
that window, and I if I pass that place, there's a lump I get because I remember the window, and like you, I
mhm,
remember staring out, and I had headphones on, and I was just listening to music, envisioning how it would happen, who would come. And one of the things for me was in that window and in that bedroom, so that particular house, I would sleep. I had a packed bag under my bed and, in hopes of a rescue, I'd have it and we'd leave. But
mm,
I often would think, is someone thinking of me? Like, is someone worried about me right now? Would someone like worried if I'm okay or whatever? And have those questions. I mean, of course, I had like different traumas happening there. Um, I would constantly be in that bed, so I know what wall my bed was on. It was a one bedroom, so we shared the bedroom, and I
mhm.
remember my bed, and I remember my bed the foot of my bed coming to that window, and I remember just sitting there worried and wondering, like, is someone out there like in your poem, is someone out there for me? Is someone thinking of me? Because I just wanted to have, and I still do. I'm an adult, and I think that's probably one of the other reasons because like I said, I was living in this 14-year-old world,
Yeah.
and I'm slowly getting out of that I would be afraid if I went back into that because one of the things that I've been working through is, as an adult, I there's part of me that wishes somebody would come out of the woodwork and say, "Hey, I just want you to know, I used to worry about you." I want it because you want somebody to
Okay.
like know somebody was out there worrying about you, or even wanting you, but they couldn't get you. And
Well,
so that, I mean, there was a lot of different windows, but that was where I was stuck at 14. And when I finally, that was the place that I tried to take my life. And that apartment, I just couldn't face it. And so, and the other ones prior to it, not at all. I couldn't go in. The only one that I could probably go in, like I said, is around the corner from my babysitter. And I think if I ever had to go through that house, I need her to be with me.
okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I did go to reunions are interesting
Mm,
because, I do not go to my high school reunions
yeah.
really, but I did go to a couple and, when they have the big football game where it's like, reunion night and people from all the years can come and they have a tent
Oh,
and everybody goes in the tent and you can see people and things like that and teachers can show up and
oh.
I did do a couple of those, and I went in the one night, and I saw some really friendly faces and talked to them, and I saw a teacher that was kind of funny because he was my seventh grade math teacher, and, I had a crush on him. I
Oh.
just thought he was it. He was it, and I didn't hide it because I had written all over my science. Oh, he was a science teacher too. All over my science and, you know, "I love Mr. Frayne." All over. I didn't hide it. I had hearts. "I love Mr. Frayne." I mean, I don't know what that's about, but I mean, I just thought he was really cute. I mean, I don't think I was the only one that felt that way.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
but I ran into him at a football game, And he was my teacher during probably my worst year of
Mm,
all my years, because my dad died in 6th grade. My sister was given into the system. It was an absolutely horrible year. The
mhm.
summer was absolutely horrible, where my mom, which I never even mentioned in the podcast, was running away from what she did in the midst of tragedy,
Mhm.
which was not good choices. And so she picked, she just up and took us on this 6-week escape across the country.
Oh my.
And I never knew where we were going to go, what was going to happen to us
Mhm.
along the way, when we were going to return. I didn't even know if we were going to
Oh.
return home. It was the craziest 6 weeks of my life. But then we do get back in time for 7th grade. And I go into 7th grade, and there's my, this really handsome teacher. But um but everything else that happened to me, it was my most depressed year. And
Mm,
I acted, strange, I guess,
mm.
because of, how out
Yeah.
of sorts I was. Nothing in my world was making sense. I ran away from home that year, and I showed up at a teacher's house, which they didn't look at as a very positive thing. They kind of looked at me as this very needy, hurting kid. And back in the day, now today, I
Mhm.
honestly think that they view hurting kids differently. Back
Right.
then, they viewed people like us as, oh, you're just annoying and you're just an attention seeker.
Mhm.
And it had nothing to do with that I was going home to a horrible situation, and I was just looking for anybody at that
Yep.
point in my life to pay attention to what was going on with me. But with all that said, I saw him at a that football game reunion night. And the only thing he said to me, and I was like, "Oh, Mr. Frayne," and I just, and he's like, "Oh, Anne, yeah, I remember you had troubles." And I
Hmm.
just thought,
That's
"Okay, well,
yeah.
that's sad
That's
because
what you remembered as.
I wish that you knew me now, because I
Yeah.
am not that person. And yeah, I did have troubles, but I wish that you didn't open that with that line."
Yeah. Yeah.
But he did. That's all that he said. And I just went, "Yeah." And then I left. I mean, I didn't what was I even gonna respond to that?
Yeah, I don't know. I worry about that too, and I think I said that in the book about my favorite teacher and, something that happened, in the summer between, I left 8th grade, which she was my teacher, to 9th grade, and, that's a crazy area, and, during that year when I was 14, there was, and I say this because I can get what you're saying is that, I trying to nutshell it because we had gone through this in another podcast, which hopefully people have listened to or they should go listen to. They'll get the content of what I'm saying is that, that 8th grade year was a turmoil for me. And I loved this one teacher and, wished, that she would take me. And I had all these other teachers, and there was another teacher who was really kind to me, even though I was afraid of her. I wasn't afraid of too many teachers. Um, but I had this perception that they would view me now, remembering me as the troubled kid then. And
Yeah,
so I, like you, there's almost like you want to go knocking on their door and saying, "Hey, I'm not troubled. Look at me now. Look at me now." You know what I mean?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
you have this thing where you're like, maybe look at me and say, "I know things were difficult for you back then, but you look wonderful." Or, "I'm proud because you have, your life is so much different." Or, yeah, I don't know. That's my fear. Nobody's said it to me, but I've not been around people like that. I mean, I haven't been in the presence of those teachers, my 8th grade year teachers who, I absolutely had so many memories with, that I haven't been around that. So I wouldn't know. But you know what? I take that back. I saw my English teacher, a nice lady. I can't think of her name right now. Haran, Miss Haran. And I saw her. My daughter was probably maybe like a year old, if that, maybe something of that sort. I was visiting New Jersey, and I saw her at a restaurant, and I went up and said hi. And the only thing she said to me was, she's like, I just remember wanting to make sure that we kept you in school. We were just, we didn't want you to not be in school. We wanted you to be in school. And I never really quite understand that, but it goes over in my head. But that's her memory of me, which I don't know how I feel about that, right? Like, does she feel
Right.
like I was that kid, the attention seeker, I mean, that's one of the things I do struggle with,
You
especially
know,
for the teachers like that teacher for you, who you absolutely, you were in love with. You
had a
um
crush on.
yeah, okay. I don't think I've ever had that like that, but interesting. Um but you worry about the ones that like him, and like my 8th grade math teacher. Do they even know, like, the significance positively in our life? And then, you know, do they even wanna know or see what you've become, and how your life has changed, and the adult that you are? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, I don't know, I wouldn't know how to react. You had troubles. Well, yeah.
I had a I'm Facebook friends with another teacher who I
Mhm,
was my homeroom teacher or whatever, the English teacher that same exact year, and I am Facebook friends with her, and,
mhm,
I really I really liked her, and I think that when she would always go down the street to drop her daughter off at uh, my one of my friends' houses because her mom was babysitting her daughter while she was at school. And I found this out that she did that. So I would ride my bike down whenever I knew that she was down there, and I would try to, like, and I know that I came across as that person that was just trying to get attention. But when
mhm,
you think about it, I was probably just trying to get attention because I was always looking for what you talk about. I
mhm,
was always looking for that 30 seconds of, "Hi, how are you? How are you doing?" You know? And really, I gotta be honest, that is all that I wanted. But
mhm.
because I wasn't really getting it, I was always seeking for it.
Yeah.
And so it came across as attention seeking.
Yeah, the same thing, like, those little small moments, you just wanna be seen,
Yeah,
right?
that
That's it.
really was it.
That's
That
you wanna be seen, but I had those. I was a bad kid, like, you're searching for attention, and after you're not getting it positively, you're like, "Well, how
absolutely,
else?" Right?
absolutely, absolutely, and
Yeah.
that's what also happened to me. I
Mhm.
became that person that, I had a younger friend of mine, and he was a freshman, and I was a junior, senior, I think senior at the time, and he would get me alcohol and other people, and we would drink in the bathroom, and we would keep the alcohol bottle at the bottom of the paper towels, put all the paper towels on top of it in the trash can and go
Oh
into
my
the
gosh.
bathroom and and that kind of stuff, and that was the kind of person that I became because I was like, "You know what? If you're not gonna pay attention to me just, for being a good kid, then you're gonna pay attention to me because 'cause I'm making bad choices."
Yeah, and again, this is so spooky that we have so many similarities, but it was 6th grade, and she'll kill me, but one of my closest friends from the 4th grade on, she used to bring it uh, in what is it, thermoses, and that was I think I started drinking in 6th grade, but in
Yeah,
school,
me too. Me
yeah, and
too.
in school, it was in 8th grade. Um But yeah, when you're just trying to. I think for me, it was like, if I get in trouble enough, or is there some kind of positivity that will come out of that when they are trying to help you? You know, I think it goes to the point of abandonment issues too, where you're
Yeah,
just testing it. I think that's what you had mentioned, like,
sure.
you're testing to see who's gonna leave you, and you figure, "You know what? If you're not gonna give me positivity, I'm gonna do this, just get it over with, just whatever."
Well, I went back to my high school, in different ways. I had been in the plays in high school, and it was one of my favorite places to be was on stage, and I ended up, seeing that teacher that I just talked about, the woman teacher that from down the street, and,
Yeah.
my 7th grade teacher, and so I saw her at a play that I was at high school. She came back and I was like, "Oh, hi," and she was like, "Oh, hi,"
Ugh,
and I was just like,
crushing.
"Really?" I mean, yes, I get it. I was not a great person back then, but
Yeah,
people
change.
I have changed. I've grown up. I'm not that
Mhm.
person. So it's interesting when you go back and you
Yeah,
revisit some of these places where you were going through horrific, traumatic things,
yeah.
and people didn't know what was going on because back then, and I'm going to say this again, people were looked at differently if you had traumatic things happen to
Right.
you, and you were looked at as that needy kid in the class. And nowadays, all the kids have something going on, and they have so many helps in place
Yeah,
nowadays, and, hurts and pains and losses and all that stuff are so recognized within the classroom, and kids are helped at so much of a deeper level than they were back when I went and probably
yeah,
even when you went.
yeah, yep.
But yeah, to it's just a shame that it's just like, you know what? I have talked about Mr. Belcher. Now, he was my 5th grade teacher who came up to me after my dad had passed away, and he was that huge man that got down on my level to say, "How are you doing?" I had He's since passed, but before that, I had run into him many times, um, in different places, and he always, "Anne, how are you? Oh, it's so good to see you. How's your mom?" Or whatever. And that just made my heart smile. And really, that's what it's about. I mean, even years later, 10, 20
Mhm.
years later, if you run into a teacher and it wasn't a great experience. It's just like, "Hi, how are you doing today? What's going on?" Be excited. Give that 1 minute of happiness to that person to let them know, "Hey, I remember you. How are you doing?"
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I think that I crave. I've not had that. I haven't had anybody ask me, and I've seen a couple of teachers outside the ones that are that I reconnected with that are in my life that make an influence on me now.
Yeah.
Um, that that one teacher, the one that absolutely loved. I saw her, a number of years ago. Again, I think the neediness may be the player that she just remembers me as, and not so much as an 8th grader that was in her class. I think it was after. I think it was those, questionable where, was she just trying to get attention or something like that? But I went, it's so, I tried to get in touch with her a lot, and I think I made things worse. And I think it just came off because I wasn't where I'm at now. I mean, and this
Yes.
was like 5 years. I'm like going back within 10 years because I was so desperate to wanting to tell her and shout out to her and say, you know, I want you to know, here's me now. I'm not that what I was then. You want to shout it out to say I've grown up and look at all the amazing things that I am. I'm so, whatever. And I think, in my mind, I've made up that just reinforced this, "Okay, there's something wrong with this kid," you know what I mean? And then, It was
Yes, I
yeah,
know what you mean.
yeah, and I'm like, "Ugh, how much do I have to scream for you to
And then
listen and say, 'I've grown up, I'm not that same person.'" Um,
yeah. I mean,
but
I've done that and then made it appear as if I was still needy, and then I'm
yes.
like, "Wow, I really screwed that up, and
Yep,
there I need to try again. I need to try again," and then it just
yes,
comes off as like and it's like, I
and
just need to stop because it's just coming off needy again, but that's
uh-huh,
not what I mean at all. I just am trying to let you know that,
yeah.
life is really amazing, and I'd like to share with you how but, um maybe they just don't care. So
Well, and
maybe
it's
it's maybe it's just move on.
and it's well, I know, and that's one of the hardest things I think to do, and I always like, my faith, and I'm like, "Just help me to just close that chapter. Just help me to move on. Why am I still stuck in this thing?" It was like and especially it's primarily with that teacher, my 8th grade teacher, and I think because I have a relationship with a number of the other ones, like, a friendship. We are adults and we are friends. Like my coach, she's my friend. Like I call her friend. And so it's that teacher and I don't like it drives me nuts. And I saw her maybe oh god, maybe 5 years ago and she was retiring from that school. So weird that, I'm, in my 40s and she's now retiring and I went in to say hi and I don't wanna say it felt forced, but maybe it did, and maybe it's just me putting that in my head, so, like, if she ever hears this, please, this is just me, and it's like, I felt and she was like, "Oh, you were a special student," but I didn't feel that special right then and there, and I've had 2 other times to see her, and I felt like, maybe if she wanted to know about me, she would come up to me instead of me going up to her, and I felt awkward, and you're right. It would just what would be awesome, and this is all we would need is, "How are you? How's your life? How are you?" That's it. I would be the same way. Just give me that because then I know that you recognize that now I'm not that little kid anymore. I'm this grown adult. And if you ask me, how am I can share with you. Hey, yeah, I'm great. I've been married 23 years. We've got 2 incredible kids. I am no longer connected with my family because I have this, I had that trauma. Now I'm building my own life. And, how are you? I want to share my successes. And especially
Right,
to those teachers and so and I'll go backwards and kind of connect where we were talking about revisiting things
right.
that when I went and saw her it was at that school that I was in 8th grade where I found the courage to say something a little bit where she made the impact with me because that was the only school but it was the first time I was in that school since I was in 8th grade
Mhm,
and it it was different. Again, like, when you're younger, everything's huge, and I go
mhm,
in there and it's compact,
mhm.
and it just was I don't know how I don't know how I felt. It was just a different I just felt like maybe it wasn't like, I wasn't supposed to be there. Do you know what I
Okay,
mean? It was
alright.
almost like a forced thing. I'm not quite sure, but I revisited that, and that was another hard thing when you revisit maybe your school. Because for me, school was the safety. School is where I got connected
Mhm,
with these teachers. Those are
mhm.
the memories once again, and yeah, you look at that, and everything that was that year is in there.
Well,
It's encapsulated.
I think for everybody, whether you had an amazing, school, y whether you had a great school connection and, teachers, peers, everything was wonderful, no matter what was going on in your life at that time, when you step into that hallway and you're walking down, I think that you become that person. I really don't think that there's any getting away from that, good or bad or whatever it is, or you could stand in a certain spot and have a specific memory or
Mhm.
go into a certain classroom and remember that teacher. Um, This is really funny, and I just have to share it because it went into my head, and I just have to share how ornery I really was. And if I walked into this specific classroom, this is what I'm going to remember. I had a teacher that it was like she wasn't giving me the attention I needed. I was really a rebel back then. I was just ornery as ornery could be. I was always thinking about how I could make this teacher's life miserable.
Yep.
And so, well, she was dating another teacher within the school district, and everybody pretty much knew that they were dating. And so I can't believe I did this, but I'm gonna tell everybody what I did. Um, She left the classroom in the morning, everybody walked the hallways.
Yeah.
I walked past. I was waiting for her to leave her little spot in front of the door to do whatever, and she left, and as I walked down the hallway, I darted right into her classroom, and I poured a bunch of rubbers on her desk, and I wrote on the chalkboard, "From so and so," which was this teacher
Yeah. Oh
that she
my
was
gosh.
dating, and I just ran out, and then, you know, when I wish that I would have been there the very second that she saw it, but, I did happen to be in, like, right after for homeroom or whatever, and I'm sitting there, and she's just like, "Who did this? Who did this?" And I was just like,
Nobody's gonna
"I
say
who did this?" So, anyway, it was just like yeah, I mean, but if I went into that classroom today,
Yeah.
and you know what? That's the kind of stuff that's kind of fun to remember in the midst of
Mhm.
trauma, because if
Yeah.
I walked down the hallways and I felt, like, this is where so and so bullied me, this is where so and so, knocked down my books out of my hand, because they used to do that to me a lot, this one particular kid. And just there could be so many bad memories, but
Yeah.
it's finding that laughter and finding, and it's kind of, I'm really proud of me, and I'm sure you did the same thing. You did whatever you could to survive.
Mhm.
And that was one of the things I did, was get this sense of humor and be this rebel in kind of a fun way.
Yeah. No, I don't think I I of course wanted to push the limits. Growing up in elementary school, I was really good. Like, very good. The only thing that I ever did really bad um was 5th grade. My 5th grade teacher on April Fool's Day, she wrote on the board like I don't know, obnoxious amount of homework. And on this one page, I got so angry, I ripped the page out of the book. So I couldn't do it. So that's my
Okay.
funny thing. The rest of the time, I was probably a handful. I used to get in fights all the time. Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, I don't I'm trying to think of, like, a funny memory in any of the classes. I mean, I can remember memories,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, I don't remember any funny, but, man, I know that I was that kid. Um when we're talking about, like, remembering in that classroom, first of all, that's hysterical. I mean, that is gonna make me laugh all day thinking about that. Um, the only, like, things I think about that I know I probably would go right back to that moment is the moment that that teacher called me from my locker because we always had the end classes and then introduced me to this person. That's the 30-second moments where that came from as her Denise. And so I know if I get in that spot, I'm going right back there to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then across the hall was a teacher who, while I was in well, we'll call group home shelter, she asked if she could get permission to take me with her daughters trick or treating. So those are the two things I think
Okay.
I would think of outside of driving teachers nuts. I mean, I remember like I was, okay, today's the day. How am I gonna get on her nerves? You know what I mean? I would walk into my one teacher, and she was so nice. I don't know why. She was a little stern,
Yeah.
um, but um I would go in there, yeah, and it was kind of funny because I would, sit there and I'm thinking, you got all these things in your mind, like, do I want to visit the counselor today? Do I want to visit the vice principal today? What do I need to do in order to get to there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But oh yeah, I don't have a funny story like the condom story. That's priceless, and I mean, is she still alive today?
Oh, I'm sure she is, and I don't think she's not a fan of mine.
Oh,
There's
okay.
That's a for sure. That is
Okay.
a for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I would think and I would hope that we could just chuckle about it,
Yeah, I would laugh
but
about it.
I don't think that she's would even wanna chuckle about that right now.
Oh.
So, I don't know. I just but, I had a lot of fun with her.
Yeah.
So,
You know what? That's good memories. Like, I would love to have had that. Like, I did something like that, even though it was, ornery, bad, but
yeah.
it's still, I don't know. There was a
You
lot
know,
of kids that did stuff, but no, that wasn't me. So,
I was that kid, though, that as I look back and revisiting in my mind those places, I was that kid that, we've talked about before, this, pushing people away, and
mhm.
if I liked you, I was gonna do that stuff to you
Oh, yeah, yeah.
because I was pushing you away, and that was just my coping because I liked you, and
Yeah,
I didn't know how to handle it. I mean, I didn't pay any attention to the people I didn't even
like
if I didn't connect with them. So, I don't know. If I
hmm.
was ornery and I treated you really bad, it was probably because I liked you, just letting
Mhm.
you know. But
Yeah. Yeah, uh, yeah, it's kinda interesting. I can say that that probably was some of the cases in some of my teachers, like, my one teacher, I talk about her as my teacher, her name was Miss Piamiotti. She was my math teacher who, like I said, my favorite. So I don't think I ever really got in trouble in her class. I was a chatty catty, so I got in trouble for talking a lot, but never that. But, the teacher across the hall who invited me or wanted to invite me to trick or treat, I used to
mhm,
she was one of these people where she just looked mean. You know what I mean? She
yeah,
came off as mean, and she was very
yeah,
stern and no, you don't play around with her. It's this or not, and after that
yeah,
time, I don't know, after that time, it was like before she invited me to do that, I thought I was that ornery kid in her class. I don't know that I was wanting her. I know that I wanted some attention from her, but I don't know if it was the positive or just the negative. But as soon as she had asked me that, just like things just turned, right? So
yeah,
now I'm not going to get in her. I think it was I see her softer side versus me seeing that on side, where we were both like this. I no longer
right,
saw it that way. I saw it differently. But
right.
yeah, and I've never spoken to her, tried, it's funny, I've tried to get in contact with teachers. And even one where I got myself in trouble, I even emailed because that wasn't available. I wrote her a letter, sent it to the school apologizing for what I had done.
Oh,
I wasn't in
mhm,
that school anymore. But I
yeah.
apologized. It was like I had to do it, And almost that, like, kind of, makes you a little bit older too when you can recognize that even as a kid you recognize something. And yeah, but yeah, I don't know about visiting anywhere else.
Would you walk through the streets with your family, with your kids?
Mm. Well, I don't think it's safe. I grew up in a city and the city's gotten worse.
Okay,
And so Trenton is not a I mean, it's hard this time of year. I have driven past. I don't think I drove past with my husband, but with my daughter as she's older. She came to the babysitter's house. She's come to the Miss Cedia who I went up with the book. But Miss Cedia didn't live in our neighborhood. She lived somewhere else. But we've passed, and I said that was my house. Up there was our bathroom that we looked out. Um,
okay,
and when I showed her these things, she didn't really know all the details yet. As she's turning 20 at the end of the week, she didn't know the details of the significance of those places. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But I've only taken her by one. And so I'm not
Mm.
sure, because if I can't go by it, it's really hard for me to say, here. And my husband, again, he just started to know my past, even though he knew
Oh,
some things weren't right.
okay.
For him, he had said, the reason why I don't want to hear it is because it's not because I don't want to hear it. It's because it hurts to know that you had to go through so much stuff. So now I don't, say, oh, you should read this, or oh, you should hear that. Because I understand where he is now, where I couldn't
Mhm.
understand before. But so I don't think I would do that with him.
I took my kids to my dad's grave, and my
Mm,
adopted mom, she's there too. And it was kinda interesting to walk around the cemetery because everybody knows everybody where I grew up. It's a
mhm,
really small town.
mhm.
And I mean, it was a big deal when we got a McDonald's, and
Oh.
it's still that way. We call it Mayberry because
Okay.
nothing changes. Everything is the same as when I went.
Mm,
The same little supermarket is there, and the one McDonald's is there, and, a couple stoplights. I mean, it really hasn't changed. So, it's really interesting to go back there and see the things. And I did take my kids to the cemetery. There's one cemetery, and to walk around that cemetery and just see everybody's graves, and oh, there's so and so and so and so, and there's this person's parent, and you just know everybody in the
mhm,
cemetery. Um, and I walked around there with my kids, and that was a big deal for me to
mhm,
kind of revisit some of that with them, and for them to, want to sit at my dad's grave and talk to him, and they did,
mm,
and that was pretty cool, actually. And I took my brother back there. He had been here, and he hadn't been to our dad's grave, um, gosh, I don't even think he wasn't at the original when my dad passed away. I think that this was the first time he had ever been there, and it was just a few years ago that I took him.
mm,
So, I mean, it was really a cool experience to go there with my brother, his son, not my mom's son, but because they had married later. But yeah, that was a cool experience. So it's like we talked about. I mean, it's kind of going back into these places and maybe making some new memories, and
memories.
yeah, some newer, fresher memories that take a different spin on, because it was just too painful for me to even.
Yeah,
And I really honestly, and this is funny, because I don't like going in that area, I always make this comment, not the cemetery itself, but the town. I
uh-huh.
say, "Oh, we're going into this area, let's hold our breath," you know, um, because we don't want any of the bad in. So, it's just
Oh,
so I hardly ever revisit that
yeah,
area. It's not a fun place for me to be. So that's funny that I'm saying that, because if I would have taken that house, that's where I would have lived for the
uh,
rest of my life.
yeah.
So I'm glad that
It
my
would
li
been
and
Yeah, it would
yeah,
be reminders, right?
yeah,
Like, you can't escape from
absolutely.
that, and I think that that's for me, that's what happened. Like, I needed to be taken out of that environment so I can grow into me and not be stuck into what I was. Like, I have a
Right,
lot of people from I don't go to reunions either, and I have a lot of people who are in the same house or are in the
right.
same neighborhood, or
Yeah,
and we lived in a very large, like, our county was large. So, chances are you don't have to know even somebody in your own, class or whatever, you're a
yeah.
freshman or whatever class. Um, but yeah, I mean, I, for me, it was being taken out of that environment to allow me to grow up
Mhm,
versus being stuck
mhm.
in that
Oh,
environment. So I know, like, so here's a good example. Um, when we got married, my husband and I, we moved. He was stationed into Nebraska, and I thought, oh my God, this is culture. I go from Trenton, New Jersey to, you know, rolling hills, farmland, stuff like that. Um, and I spent, I think we were there 6 years,
Mhm.
and it was 6 years out of the environment that I had grown up in. So I got a taste of that. So then when we got stationed back into New Jersey, because my son had a lot of medical, so we went to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. It was like going back into that environment again where you're trying to fit in, where you're trying to figure yourself out. And I'm like an adult. And like that's really difficult to do. And it was more difficult then to go into those other neighborhoods, or maybe I drove by or did something. It was really difficult then because I didn't want my kids to be exposed to, I mean, they're good people there, don't get me wrong, but for
Yeah.
me to expose them to my memories, or, I didn't want my memories to start taking over after I'd worked so hard to kind of separate myself.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's hard to, my whole entire, like I said, the city is so big and it's changing. You know what I mean? There's where there were stores, there's something different. Where there was this, there's something different. But I could never live into my area either, because until you can separate yourself, I feel like you're constantly battling at the age you were in that
Yeah.
environment and you can't grow.
Yeah, well, I grew up, um, about a half an hour from where I live now, and,
Mhm.
it's far enough. It's a good
Yeah,
distance, and I have to say that since I've lived in this area, I've done more growing up
yeah.
than I've become who I am,
Mhm.
and I never would have been able to become this person if I still lived
If you
there,
stayed.
and I know that for a fact.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same exact way. And for me, it was trying to fit in. Like where I'm at now, I don't need to fit in. I'm just who I
Yeah,
am. And so, at my adult age, I don't need a ton of friends. I have my close friends, and I'm content and happy. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love making new friends, but
right.
it's like you have those handful and that's really what you need. And I just, yeah, you get into that environment and it's like I always, every time I go up, I feel like I'm always looking over my shoulder, always like, oh, I don't know how to fit in. Even though we're all adults now, I get around the people that I was in high school with and I go back to that kid trying to fit in, but I shouldn't, because that's not where I was. I don't want to go back to that
Right.
time. That's not where I want
Right.
to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that same with me. It's like once I got out of that environment, I grew and I've been growing.
Right.
So, and it's continuation. So,
So
if
it's a
I
good place to visit, but not to live for very long
yes.
periods of time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And when I visit, I'm very selective of where I go and whom I see.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Well, Denise, I mean, this has been a great episode, and I think honestly, this is a lot of stuff that people are not talking about. So
Mm.
this was interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I agree.
and I really want to thank you for writing your book because, I mean, that just takes it to a whole nother level where
Right.
you're putting it out there. We're talking about it, we write things down, and now you're sharing it. We're sharing it for
Mhm.
other people to read and hear and be able to maybe help their lives as well, because that's why we do this. It's not just to tell our story, not to tell on other people.
Right.
But for it to go out into the world and for other people to know that they're not alone, that
Right.
these thoughts, these feelings, these things that we're talking about, I know that many, many people out there are relating with. So
Yeah.
um we're putting it out there for you, and I hope that it helps and changes somebody. And just go ahead and spread the word about Real Talk with Tina and Ann. And I really appreciate Denise Bard coming on every now and then, and she's going to continue to help us out here at Real Talk. So I just want to thank you guys for listening. Thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts here at Real Talk, and we'll see you next time.